For those who are new to the group, we started as regular function as service developers, but very soon we realized we could help businesses by working smarter, not by sprinting faster, like in Scrum terms. So we started defining serverless not just as a tech stack, but as a pragmatic mindset for solving business problems. And we are engineers, so we like to engineer, and way too often we focus on the tech tools, not the things that the tech tools let you do. So using the analogy from car mechanics, we enjoy pimping up our cars like infrastructure code pipelines more than driving the business forward and taking them places. So that's why we now see serverless as a state of mind, a way to focus on business value. But I know it sounds fluffy, so in simple terms, it comes how you triage the problem. So in general, if the platform has it, you use it. If the market has it, buy it. If you can change the requirements, then do it. But if you have to build it, then own it. And we believe that this thinking can be applied to any tech stack, even on-prem. So this broad definition of serverless allows us to explore various IT topics. And you can see on our YouTube channel, YouTube@serverlesstoronto.org, educational events we curated over the last 7 years, and many of them are still relevant today. So if you're first time with us and if you like today's session, you will enjoy the next month where Tim Kitchens, a software architect and the founder and the mentor, will demonstrate how AI integrations across product strategy, requirements, architecture, and testing. This is way beyond code generation. So this is a February meetup, and then we have nothing else planned for now for 2025. So you have non-promotional, altruistic topics to share. Feel free to message John and me, and we'll pencil you in for spring. And last but not the least, I want to thank Manning Publications. They've been supporting us for 5 years now, and they generously donate the title at every meetup. So please complete the survey. That's bit.ly/SLSTO for Serverless Toronto to qualify for the raffle at the end of today's meetup. But if you don't win, Manning provided 45% discount code for the book we're going to be discussing today. So scan the barcode and enjoy the saving. But wait, maybe you win, so you don't buy it first. And before I hand the mic to our guest, I need to answer the question, why this session? So we know that adding AI to applications is becoming easier, but LLM outputs are non-deterministic, so your approach for testing must change. Second thing is, like, too often you tweak a prompt to improve one thing only to break something else. And then there is a challenge of getting the best context via RAG into the LLM for processing. And so building POCs to impress your boss or client is not the same as deploying production-ready software, especially coming from traditional software and systems engineering perspective. And you know that we love Manning Publications because they offer balance between the price and quality. So when I read Rush's book about LLM reliability, I liked it so much that I asked him to introduce me to the author. And I wanted him to share his learnings with the community and answer your questions. And we are really lucky that you said yes. And thank you, Rush. And floor is yours. That's my intro.
Yeah, firstly, just wanted to say thanks so much for having me here. I'm from Toronto as well. I've been in San Francisco for the last six years, but I grew up in Mississauga. So really glad to be with you all and super excited to talk about this topic. And yeah, I'll just share my screen and I want this to be more of a conversation. So feel free to, send a bunch of messages in the Slack, ask questions. That way we can make it more fun and engaging as well. Cool. You guys can see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. So we'll be talking about the art and science of large language model reliability, really how we can build high quality AI systems that are not just highly performant, but also very trustworthy. So we'll be talking into all the different topics in there. So just a little bit about me before we get started. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Persana. We're a YC-backed company, and we did the YC batch in winter 23, and we've been growing since then. So I'll also talk about our journey and the things we did to build scalable, effective, and trustworthy AI systems. I've been in the large language model space since 2018, actually. So really seen, the rise when large language models weren't that powerful to now when they're so powerful. But even at that time, I was really shocked about how valuable and transformative they were, even back in 2018, when the first kind of BERT and those large language models really started to grab attention. We really saw this whole wave of slowly, incrementally, they've gotten better and better, and now it's sort of become exponential. So we'll be talking about that, how the large language model landscape has changed and been happy to write this book about large language model reliability, especially because, I feel there's a huge gap in stuff that we can actually productionize versus something that, we can build a quick hack prototype, but actually taking it into production makes, we need to make sure it's not hallucinating, it's giving high quality outputs, it's not biased, it's also safe, and you're constantly being able to test and evaluate how your users are actually using it. So this is a fun project that I actually worked on in 2018 where we use large language models to, use machine learning for good. We really used it to quantify the scale of abuse against women on Twitter. And this was really impactful. And I think this is just an example how we can, take AI and apply it for good to make the world a better place. And that's what inspired me on my journey, that kept me going is I just saw the benefits of using AI in different industries and how powerful it can be. So just a little bit about Persona before we dive into some tactical examples, because I'll be talking about how we are building AI agents at Persona. So what we do at Persona is basically give go-to-market teams, so sales teams, marketing teams. I see there is someone in growth here as well in this meetup. So being able to use the power of AI to convert these high-intent leads and automate all their manual processes. Because intent is scattered around millions of touch points and is impossible to analyze manually. A human cannot actually go and look at every touch point to figure out who is the best lead that they should reach out to and how can you actually automate all their processes. So we use the power of large language models along with ranking models to identify high intent sources across hundreds of different sources. So instead of you buying one data provider, we get all the data for you, and our AI agents are able to pick which data provider is important so that your sales team or your marketing team can go out there and close more deals than they could. So this is what we'll be talking about. So firstly, just talking about the large language model landscape, understanding hallucinations, basic and advanced prompting techniques. We have a strong focus on RAG and AI agents, where we'll particularly be talking about evaluating these, like how do we make sure a RAG system is actually working well? How do we make sure your agents are, responding accurately to your user's query and, doing it in an efficient manner? And we'll wrap up with some bias and ethics as well. So we've seen crazy rapid advances in the large language model space over the last year. And even now with DeepSeek, I do have a slide talking about DeepSeek, so stay tuned for that. So, we've seen rapid advancements, GPT-4, Claude becoming so good. The real point that we are now in a moment where productivity is no longer tied to workforce growth, but through this intelligent technology that can be scaled without limits. So imagine we're able to build an agent that can actually do this work, and you have a human that trains it. And once it's trained, your company is able to grow without any limits. So that's really the power of AI and, where the industry is going towards. But, this has a lot of impacts, right? We need to make sure it doesn't hallucinate, it's not harmful, it's highly performative, and is not, wasting resources. And the HBR estimates that almost 80% of Gen AI projects will fail. And that is because of this, right? We want to make sure they're performant and they are not hallucinating and they can actually be used well by our users. We started off in this Gen AI wave one, where you would just put in a prompt, it would give you some output. Then I feel last year we moved into this wave two, where you're putting in a lot of information, it's collecting information from the web, using different tools and giving you insights. But now in 2025, we're actually entering wave three. and that is agents, right? You want to be able to automatically take actions, not just give you the insights, but predict which of the insights is most important that you should take action on. And what is the risk tolerance? What is the right decision to be made? So that's when we're entering wave three, and we'll be diving deeper into that. Before we dive into hallucinations, what does it actually mean to hallucinate? Does anybody want to answer this? What are your thoughts on hallucinations?
I'll take a stab. Uh,
Yeah,
I think hallucinations are like when an LLM makes up something.
yeah,
It doesn't really, and it's very confident when it makes it up. So yeah, it's not
yeah,
really true.
yeah. And that's a good point you brought up, especially when it's confident, it's more dangerous because people can actually believe that. So the definition that we'll use is just generating fabricated or inaccurate information. So like this Air Canada chatbot, which was held liable, and Air Canada had to actually pay for it, but it was giving passengers bad advice. You see legal models that are hallucinating 1 out of 6 times, which is huge, right? Especially in industries like law, healthcare, where it's more important than ever to give the right answer, it's making up stuff. So we need to be really careful and try to prevent this as much as we can. So what causes these? One is, the lack of training data. It hasn't been trained on, the right data sets. Um, it's a lack of real-time retrieval. If you ask it a question like, what's the weather right now? If you don't connect it to a web source, it will not be able to answer that. It can also be harmful because, like, let's say, in the healthcare field, it has been found out a particular drug has become dangerous or is not the right medical approach. It shouldn't give you the outdated information. So it is especially dangerous in, high stakes domains like healthcare law, even in law, right? Like laws are changing constantly. So it should be able to give you that information that is accurate and correct in real time. So what are some ways we can reduce hallucinations? So the easiest way is, the choice of large language model really reduces hallucinations. The newer models tend to be better at lowering hallucinations. So for example, GPT-4 had much lesser hallucinations compared to GPT 3.5. The model parameters, advanced prompting techniques, fine-tuning, RAG, and agents and tools. And we'll be talking about each of these. So we'll go through that. So this is how accuracy improved model by model. So this is to show you as models get better and better, it's just gonna keep getting better. So the newer models are gonna score 100% on these tests as they improve and improve and improve. So GPT-4 is the green one. ChatGPT, the earlier versions were not as good. So what are some basic prompting tips that you can use? You can use an assertive voice, even though it's really funny, but if you type in all caps, there's research been done that a model actually obeys you more. Another thing is reiterating the rules at the end of the prompt. So often what happens if you have a long prompt, the stuff in the middle gets missed. So I really recommend reiterating the rules at the end of the prompt. So that way the context is more it's given to the model at a higher score. And we'll be showing this in one of the slides as well, how the stuff in the middle of a large language model prompt actually kind of goes missing. Be descriptive and use examples. So this is few shot prompting, where you give it a few examples of what your output should be. Another one is you act as an expert. You tell the prompt, like if you're asking a law question, you tell the model to act as an expert lawyer. Um, the last one is, asking it to substantiate its claims. And this is useful if you want to refer back, especially when we get to RAG and agents. This is very easy to do. So that way, your users are able to also see where the data is coming from. So adjusting the model parameters is also one way to reduce the hallucinations. So for example, here, if you increase the temperature 1, it gives you incorrect dates when you're asking this question. If you're looking to, write more creative stories and poems, or something creative, like marketing material, you might want to increase the temperature. But if you're looking for something factual, and more grounded, you should lower the temperature. So that's when you'll get a more, grounded answer. So we briefly touched upon zero and few shot prompting. So zero shot prompting just means, you just type your question, it gives you the answer. Few shot actually means you give it an example. Let's say I am asking it, what is 5 plus 5? You show an example of what is 2 plus 2 before, and then you give it, then you ask it what is 5 plus 5. So that way it's kind of learned what your example is like. And this has been shown to, significantly improve the accuracy in your answers. This is really exciting because this is chain of thought prompting, and this is the foundation of the new DeepSeek models and how they run. So it's really cool how they were able to use this technique that has been around for a while and, leverage that to reduce the training costs and make it easy for you to, run your DeepSeek model on a local machine as well. So the way this works is that the same thing that I mentioned with the 2 plus 2, you ask it in the top of the prompt, and you give it an example, and it's not able to answer in this case. And the reason is why, because you didn't explain to it how you did that. So when you tell it, you give this problem. So the last one is actually the question you want to ask. This one is the example that you're putting in. So when you just give it the answer, it hasn't figured out how to do it correctly. But when you teach it a little bit, you tell it Roger started with 5 balls, and then this is how the answer is 11. It learns better how to answer this question. And that's really the foundation of, how DeepSeek was able to do that. Is that I just tried asking it, what's the difference between Persona and other sales tools? It's done this chain of thought reasoning, um, to actually figure out and give a good answer. So it's gone through the steps of, evaluating what are the questions I need to ask, what is my thought process, and then it comes up with an answer. And DeepSeek uses chain of thought in two ways, actually. One is in the inference, so this is when it's doing the output, but also in the training, it's used a high quality data set of chain of thought examples. So, a prompt with the chain of thought examples where it's thought through the use case, and it's learned to, be much better at this chain of thought and the reasoning style. Um, so very exciting time in AI, being able to run a model which was thought to be really expensive to build. We're able to do that at a much lower cost. So I think that's just to show you, right, that there's so much advancements and stuff we can do in the foundational layers to make it more efficient, make it more robust. And that includes, lowering the cost, using less GPUs, and being able to, build models that are accessible on smaller devices, consume much less power. So we'll be talking more about that as we go on. Another example is a tree of thought prompting. This is an example to make it more accurate, where Sudoku is a great example, right? If you are trying to solve a Sudoku puzzle, the way you would want to try is you would want to solve for one number and then check if all the other numbers are still fitting. So we applied the same logic to prompting, right? Let's say we have an e-commerce chatbot that's saying, your TV is malfunctioned. The LLM can evaluate three options. Should it return it if it's in the 30-day window? Should you do a manufacturer warranty, or should you replace it? So we can actually go and see how these are being applied and then run them step by step, and then find out which is, the best answer to give the user. And throughout these steps, you can also ask the user, have you purchased it in the last 30 days? Is this, still in the manufacturer warranty? So you'll figure out those steps. Because sometimes if you just put all the examples in the large language model, it's not able to figure it out because it hasn't figured out that step-by-step reasoning. So it's a way to kind of simulate that using steps. This is a really good way of evaluating, which is called self-check GPT, where you basically run you run the output n times. So let's just say you ran it 10 times, and then you take each sentence and you see how many of the large language models have agreed with it. And if you find the response which has the most agreeable sentences um, amongst all the n samples, you could consider that being the best and return that to the user. You might have seen cases where you need to run GPT multiple times, ask it questions again and again, and then finally it gives you the answer, right? So if you were able to show your users just the best answer, your users would would be much more satisfied, and it would also reduce the hallucinations because it's not making stuff up, right? So you can do this behind the scenes before you return it to the user. You can run it a few times and then select the best answer. This is when we go into using large language model as a judge, because the large language model is actually used in a way to figure out which is the best output. And this is one of the most common techniques I've seen that companies are using right now. It's like pretty much all AI startups that I've spoken to, and even larger companies where they're trying to figure out if a chatbot has accurately answered a user. They just send it back to a large language model. And this could vary between just saying, was your answer helpful? Was it not helpful? It could also ask, you could also ask the large language model, has it gone off track? The larger companies who are building chatbots are often seeing this issue where people are asking the chatbot, how do I take care of my dog, right? And it's still giving you advice when it shouldn't be doing that. You don't want your company or your brand to give advice that it's not supposed to. So you can put it through a judge before you return the response actually to the user. You can say, has it gone off track? Are you talking about only the correct topics? And is your answer helpful or not? And based on that, you can, call a large language model again, or you can just send a message to the user, sorry, I'm unable to answer this. So that's when you keep things more safer and you're able to build a system without even having training data, actually. You don't even need training data. You can just send it back to a large language model and ask it, is it helpful? Have you gone off track? These are just the topics I want to talk about. So we'll be talking about how to use this in the agents and RAG architecture as well when we get there. Just want to stop there. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts they want to add in here? I'm not able to see any questions. Daniel?
I mean, if I could ask just a question based on the information that you shared,
Yeah.
and particularly in your use case at Persona, because you might have used a lot of these techniques, I'm pretty sure. So, how did you, two questions particularly, how did you factor in the delay, like the latency aspect of it? Like, because when you are uh, like using all these models, particularly LLM as a judge, or all
Yeah.
these things about things, so does it
Yeah.
when you're directly doing this in a chatbot sense, for lack of a better phrase, uh, I mean, it's not a chatbot, but it could be like you're directly interacting. The user is waiting on the other side of the line. Does that
Yeah.
latency aspect, how do you handle that? Because what
Yeah.
I've seen, and I can talk about it later at the end of the meetup, but if you're using LLMs to then write the output to a database, which can be then consumed later, so like asynchronously, if you will, uh,
Yeah.
that 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 the latency doesn't matter then, and all these good things that you're talking about really help in that case. So
Yeah.
if you could share some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So you're talking about like real time when you're using it
Yes,
real time.
yes, that's
Yeah,
correct. Yeah.
definitely. And I've seen even companies getting worried about not just the latency, but even large companies are really getting
Mhm.
worried about, calling a large language model again because of the cost. Because they have hundreds of thousands of
Of course, yeah.
users, and calling another large language model at the end and taking in all their outputs is twice the amount of cost, which does add up a lot. So I'd say one way I've seen companies are fixing this is that they're using a cheaper model to, run these. So they'll use the cheapest model for evaluating, like the cheapest model that gives a good response, to actually save costs and also time, because a lot of times the cheaper models are smaller, so they're able to give you a faster output. And one thing that's been really beneficial is that the speed has also improved for these a lot. If you see the Claude Sonnet models, they're super fast. And we use that at Persona for doing some of our real-time evaluations. And another thing I've also seen is, besides using large language model as a judge, is just using kind of like an embedding of semantics to make sure, like, let's say you only want your chatbot to talk about refunds and ask questions, right? Ask questions about your product. You don't want it to divert from those topics. So you can just run an embeddings to make sure, like an embedding score to make sure it's not gone off topic. That's a cheaper way to, just make sure you're on topic and not doing anything crazy in real time. Um, yeah, hope that answered your question.
That does, yeah, yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is
another question.
yeah,
Just a
good,
quick
yeah.
one, hopefully. You mentioned like a self-check GPT. So
Yeah.
there was an implementation on GitHub, and one of the authors is part of that. Is that this the University of Cambridge?
Yeah, I think that's the same one. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's the same
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, you can give that a try. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and these are just some prompting principles that there was a research paper actually on this that proved that these 26 ways of prompting were improving the performance. So one thing here, number 6 was actually the most funny, where you just tell the model, I'll give you a tip if you answered correctly, and the model was actually more likely to give you the right answer. So this is just to show you that the way these models are trained can actually use a lot of these human approaches to being able to, give you a right answer. So I just found this very intriguing. You can take a screenshot of this slide if you want to give these a try. Yeah. So this is to show you that GPT-4 gave longer responses when you offered a tip. So 11%, I will tip 200, it gave you a longer response. And when you said I'll tip 20, it was 6%. And when you said I won't tip at all, that's a -2%. Um, so now the problem, despite effective prompting, is this real-time thing, right? Like if you're an e-commerce store and you have a chatbot and a user is asking you, do you have the OLED 55-inch TV with integrated soundbar in stock for same-day delivery? And it says, unfortunately, as an AI assistant, I don't have access to this. So this brings us to RAG, which you might have heard a lot about. So what RAG does is combines large language models with real-time information. It'll dynamically fetch context from external sources and make sure the knowledge is up to date and grounded. And it'll tell the user to only answer the question from the given data. If the question cannot be answered, the model should state that it cannot answer it. So let's just quickly dive into how we will build a simple RAG pipeline, and then we'll talk about how do we make sure your RAG is actually working correctly. So the first step, right? Let's take an example. Let's say you are like an e-commerce app on Shopify, right? You are a Shopify store and you want to build a chatbot. So what kind of data would you need to ingest? You would need to know all your product data. So you take in all your product data, convert it to raw text, split it into smaller chunks. And the reason for this is because we'll be creating embeddings, and large language models have a context window. So you can't just put all the data into the large language model. So you extract the data, split it into chunks. The second one is embeddings. You create embeddings of these chunks. You can use the OpenAI embeddings. And what embeddings are a way to capture the meaning and semantics of a text. So it's just a way to, in a vector space, be able to determine how similar are things to each other. And this is used for, we'll talk about it in the next slide, but being able to answer the user's query by finding in the closest information that is as similar to the user's query. So we convert it to this mathematical embeddings. And then we store it into a vector DB. So, we can use Pinecone, use many of the vector DBs out there to actually store these embeddings. The fourth one is retrieval. So a user might ask, I have these Adidas sneakers. I want to find out if you guys have any sales going on, right? So the user types its query, and because we've built this embeddings, we embed the user's query first, and we find out the document or the chunk which was closest to this. So what we actually end up finding is this help center article that talks about a new discount they have on these shoes and what the discount code is. And then we take in that document, the raw text, feed it into the large language model, and tell the large language model to answer the user's question only based on the document. And then the large language model has the particular context about the shoe and the discount, and then tells the user, great news, we have this shoe in stock and it's 40% off. Here's your coupon code. So that's just the basics of how to build a RAG pipeline. And we can talk about this example as well, where someone who is on a banking website asks their chatbot, how do I withdraw my money? And the chatbot is trained on wiki and past conversations. So it searches for the relevant chunks, and then it returns that to a large language model with the user's question, the prompt, and the enhanced context. The enhanced context comes from these closest embeddings that we found, and it converts it back into text because we've stored the embeddings and the raw text, and gives the GPT all the information that we need to be able to answer this user's question. Now, what happens if you don't have the answer? Like, what if the closest relevant information isn't even there? What if we don't have how do I withdraw my money, and we have how to deposit my money, and only that one is found? How do we prevent that from being used? The good part is that your prompt, the system prompt that you put in, it'll tell you not to answer the question if you don't have the data. So if the context doesn't include anything about the user's question, it will just say, sorry, I don't have enough information to answer that question. And what if it still makes a mistake? That's when you would use large language model as a judge, and the different evaluation techniques that we'll be going through. So here are some best practices for RAG. So the first step is, right, making sure you have the best data accessible to your RAG. If you put in bad quality data into your RAG pipeline, you shouldn't expect, good quality outputs. If you're putting in old, outdated product docs, like let's say you're, a Shopify e-commerce store, and your team is constantly updating the discounts, and constantly updating like what products they have, you need to make sure your RAG pipeline is constantly updating as well. You need to make sure your RAG pipeline is constantly ingesting those blogs, ingesting those articles, to take that information in. Experimenting with different chunking sizes is also key here. Experiment with, small chunks, large chunks. One thing that I've seen really effective in chunking is make sure each chunk has an overlap with the chunk right next to it. So one chunk should have a little bit of context from the chunk besides it, just so that it doesn't lose, the context, what it's actually talking about besides it. So I'd say I'd recommend at least 10 to 20% of an overlap in between the chunks. The next one is embedding selection. You want to make sure your embeddings are good. So do an evaluation to see, cost-wise, performance-wise, what makes sense for you. And now we get into this, what happens if have too much context length. If you retrieve 20 documents at once, and you put this through RAG, you'll see that the documents in the middle are actually not getting used by the model as effectively. Only the ones in the beginning and at the end are kind of, having the use. So this brings you to the idea, right? Like Claude, all these models mention that they have, a huge amount of context, but they're actually not using the stuff in the middle as much as you think. So that's when you need to be really careful when building your RAG. And that's the good part about RAG, right? It'll fix that issue where your long prompt in RAG, if in Claude, if you just copy paste like 10 different Wikipedia pages, it'll sort of lose stuff in the middle. So that's when you will use RAG and effectively build a pipeline that, based on your chunking size and the retrieval, you should usually top it off at 2000 tokens. So do not give more than 2000 tokens at once to a RAG pipeline because it'll sort of lose the context in there. So some ways are, always making sure your data is up to date. So like I mentioned, having that pipeline that's constantly up to date, using metadata filtering and advanced RAG techniques. So for metadata filtering, this one's interesting because let's say you ask a question on Best Buy chatbot, right? How do I set up international roaming on my iPhone 15 Plus plan? And for some reason, there is a document for iPhone 14 which has Mobile Plus plan and more sort of words about your question, but you don't want to get an answer based on iPhone 14. You only want iPhone 15. So the way we do this metadata retrieval is we filter it for only documents with iPhone 15 and international roaming. And you can use a large language model to build these buckets, or you can also define them using, embeddings and just map them to the right topic there. So that way you're only looking at, documents for your particular phone, just to make sure you're not getting the wrong data in there. Another thing is combining RAG with a keyword-based search. So this is something we do at Persona, right? It's not just RAG, but also doing a regular search to make sure you're getting in all this data, doing a keyword search to match the user's keyword in addition to RAG. So the hybrid search has been really effective for us to build a good quality lead search. We have around 700 million people on our database or more. So we need to do that keyword search and the ranking scoring along with RAG to actually give our users the best responses. And we experimented with all of these techniques and found out that using a hybrid search worked the best for that particular use case. There are cases where we are looking at 10K information or things like that where RAG is much more effective than doing a keyword search. So I'd say definitely experiment to see, what works for your use case. Cool. So now we are entering the agentic era, as I mentioned. So this is the most exciting thing of the year. People are constantly talking about how to build agents. What are the new agents going to be like? Tons of companies, including Google, are working on AI agents that can make purchases for you, such as booking flights, hotels. We're going to see large language models actually take action where instead of you, asking just what the best flights are, it's actually able to book your flight, book your hotel, and, with one simple user interface, that will be possible. Not saying that it will be one user interface, but that will definitely be possible where companies are trying to, create a chatbot where, it can do all kinds of actions. So you're only on one chat interface. So how does an AI agent actually work? You can think of it as using the ability to use tools when it wants to. So you ask a question, what's the weather? And GPT now is able to figure out when to pull into a website or not, and when to answer from its regular trained content. So it'll be able to figure out what tool to use, how to apply that feedback, and how to take action on it. And you can also combine this with RAG. So you can do an agent with RAG, which is called agentic RAG, and that's what we built at Persona. I'll be talking about that in the next slides. So how do these agents reason? The simplest technique that a lot of these agents are using is React agent. And this is actually really simple to understand. So all you do is you have a prompt and you give it the possible tools. So I'll say I want to give it access to searching on Google. I want to give it access to, doing some flight searches, finding me flights. I want to give it access to another tool that can, look up travel blogs and give me answers. So now I ask it a question. I'm looking for a tropical vacation in February. Find me the best places to go. It might first do a Google search for the best like tropical places out there, finds out, what are the tropical places to go to. Then it'll look for flights and it'll use another tool. And the way it does this is a little similar to the chain of thought, the way we, ask the model to think and, ask a question and a thought and an action. That way we sort of get the model to reason a bit more. So the model starts to reason a little bit by itself. So for example, aside from the Apple remote, what other device can the Apple remote interact with? It decides to do a search. It finds out the observation. Actually, first it thinks, right? I need to use the search feature and do a search to find out more information about the Apple remote. So it finds out an observation and then it goes back until it knows the final answer. So it looks at Apple remote was originally designed to control the media center. I need to search front row next and find out what other device can control it. So it does another search. It couldn't find that information. Front row is not found. I need to search for front row software. Now it says front row is a discontinued media center software. It still hasn't found out your answer, so it needs to do another thought. And now it goes to your front row is controlled by an Apple remote. So the answer is keyboard function keys. And there you go. It has been able to find the answer. One thing you need to be very careful is that you don't need to go, you should make sure that it doesn't go on an infinite loop. So definitely add some logic in there to, stop it after certain attempts and just return a general answer to the user or return your findings so far. Say I couldn't, find the answer, but these are my findings. Because if you let it keep going on until you know the final answer, it might keep running. So that's one thing. So in Persona, we built a quantum agent, which is one of our most used features. And this agent can basically access a lot of our tools and a lot of our RAG pipelines as well. So, you can ask it like, what's the email of this person? It will use our email finder, find it out. You can ask a question about me. Who is Rush? What school did he go to? It'll pull that information out. You can ask it a question, what are the risks in investing for the Google stock? It'll pull up a 10K report from Google and be able to use that information. So we're combining RAG and agents by using RAG as just another tool it could use. Yeah. So pretty cool there. I think being able to use agents and RAG is really cool because that way the agent can figure out, what tools it should use, what RAG pipelines it should use. So how do we evaluate and monitor RAG and agents? So the first step is, create a test set and monitor your RAG in production with tools like Okario, Galileo. And we have this RAGA's evaluation metrics, which is just a free Python package that you can install, and it has all these metrics for you. We'll talk about a few of them. So for example, if you ask your RAG pipeline, what is the capital of France? And when did it become the capital, right? So you get a response, the capital is Paris, France. But if you see here, we're actually missing the completeness. It's not telling me when it became the capital. Again, here, it's giving you the answer, the capital is France, but it's not answering that question. But how do we figure out it's not making up stuff? Let's talk about that first. So we want to make sure it's only using the data in here and not making up stuff. So we'll run this prompt, evaluate the following response for faithfulness to the context. And this is the context that we put in. It should not invent anything new and not contradict the context. So this is when it will return like a high score because it's not making anything up. It's not giving you incorrect information, but the completeness is actually low. So this is very similar to our large language model as a judge, where we take in the evaluation criteria and give that output there. Yep. Similarly, you can, see what is the chunk attribution, like how many of the chunks did you use. You want to make sure that your RAG pipeline is being able to use the chunks that it returns, because if it's not really using all the chunks, maybe the way you did your chunking was, kind of wrong. So, not wrong necessarily, but maybe not the most optimal way, because you might be, wasting resources. It might lose context in the middle. So just check those, and these are all included with the Raga's Python model as well. Another one you can do is, just seeing how much of the chunk is used. If 2% of the chunk is used very often, maybe you should be thinking about, making your chunk size smaller or experimenting with different sizes there. Now that we talked about RAG, how do we evaluate your agents? This is a little bit more tricky because an agent consists of three parts really: the router, the execution path, and the performance. So by router, is it going to the right, is it going to the right tool? Is it, using the right execution path? Um, we need to check on that. So first up, making sure your router is able to choose the right function. If I'm asking about refunds, I don't want it to go to the module that's allowing me to buy a new product, because I don't want to do that. I want a refund, right? So we'll show you ways how to test this. The second one is, making sure the orders are getting all the information, as well as catching any edge cases there. If you put in an order number to a chat bot, is it sending that order number to the right tool? Is the agent path and performance too much? Like, am I, running 20 different paths to get a simple answer of what's the revenue of Google, right? I should only be going one or two paths max, because this is wasting a lot of cost, wasting a lot of resources, and also giving your users like too little time, right? Like they don't want to wait too long to get a simple answer. So add iteration counters, see how it's being used in production, because you might catch cases where, your users are asking questions that you've never seen before. So use these observability platforms. At Persona, we use this tool called Helicone, Helicone, and it's really simple to implement with all your large language model calls. You just change the endpoint, and it's able to, keep track of it in this UI. They have a web UI, and you can sort through the calls that are taking the most time or taking the most cost. We had an issue like not too long ago where someone was asking for something crazy, and it was going on a crazy loop. Like it was costing us like $3-4 when it should have been cents. So using that, we were able to catch it the next day. So I think if we didn't have that platform, we wouldn't know where that cost is going. We'll just see our GPT bill spike up. So being able to catch that in time and use these platforms is really effective. Um, Now let's talk about multi-agents. This is kind of the last thing I want to wrap up with, because we are going into this era where it's not just one agent, but you have multiple agents that are good at doing tasks. So if you have refunds, right, your refund agent should only be able to find the order number, process the refund. Your question answering agent should actually just be able to answer questions from, the help center blogs. You wouldn't want to mix those up, because it'll get really messy, right? If a refund agent also has access to, being able to look at blogs, look at that, it just makes things more confusing for the large language model. So it's better to split these up. So a user asks a question, and then the first step is the large language model decides which agent should it go to. So these are two different agents that it'll go to. And like a user asks, I bought a pair of jeans last week, but they don't fit. Can I return them? You want to be able to take that and send it to the refund one. And the refund agent says, I can help you with your refund. Please provide your order number. And the refund agent has access to all the tools, all the different tools there. Um, And now this goes into graph-based frameworks. I remember someone mentioned that they were also investigating, graph-based frameworks, and LangGraph is an awesome one, where it goes beyond just a simple agent, where you can create multi-agent workflows and have cycles and being able to evaluate and see each part of it more transparently and being able to test and debug and evaluate tasks. So I really like these graph-based frameworks because they made it really easy to test that. Before LangGraph, we had actually built our own kind of custom graph at Persona, but LangGraph has made it a lot simpler to, build these flexible workflows. So first step, like how do we want to test our e-commerce bot, right? You give it a few examples of end-to-end, what sizes are available, and our summer collection includes sizes. I want to return an order, it doesn't fit. I can help with that. So you create this test data set and you just put it to large language model as a judge. So you just give it the answer that was in the test database and the one that was created, live when you were doing the test. And this is the sample large language model as a judge prompt. Just return, true or false. It's okay if the response includes extra useful details as long as it's factual. Just mark it as true or false. So just, taking your end-to-end answer. The next one is making sure your routing is done correctly. So is the intent when the user says they want a refund, is it going to the refund agent? When they ask, do you have summer dresses in stock? Is it going to the product inquiry agent? And you can check this by just making sure, the output has gone through that route. Another one is evaluating the trajectory. And this becomes really important because if you're asking for refunds, you don't want it to go order, find order, find order, find order, find order, find order. If you put an incorrect order number, you don't want it to sort of do these tools unnecessarily. So you can make sure, that the trajectory is simple. For example, if you're asking for hoodies, it should only go to the product inquiry agent. Maybe look up the discounts function, the tool as part of this agent, and then just give you the answer. If you say, I want to return my purchase, it should only go to the refund agent, get all the information they need, and, give them a follow-up. So just making sure it's not, going in circles, in loops, not doing things that are inefficient. Yeah, so the last kind of topic is bias and ethics, especially with agents, right? When you are being able to take actions on data, it's really important to make sure these are not biased. Your training data doesn't have bias. You're not harming, sensitive domains, especially when it deals with hiring, healthcare, criminal justice, making sure loan approval model is not rejecting people from specific demographics. And this happened when we were doing face recognition, right? Where all these companies had this issue where, it wasn't appropriately, doing it based on race. We need to make sure this doesn't happen when we're going into large language models because it's really harmful for us as a society. As well as security is also really important, right? You don't want your agents to being able to access data that they're not supposed to and give users, access to stuff that they're not able to take action on. So this is when it's going to get really important to test these things really, really well. If you're asking if, in the future we have a banking agent that's able to transfer money, it shouldn't be able to transfer money from someone else's account. So having those safety checks in place, we did touch upon, some of these, but there's a lot more stuff that we don't have time to cover. So it'll be mentioned in my book. And then, as we learn and evolve, this is a growing space. So now's the best time to really take advantage and, dive deep. We're seeing, companies like DeepSeek come up, which are, constantly improving architectures, making them more reliable, easy to use, and taking less cost to productionize. So really exciting stuff there. And just want to wrap up by saying AI systems are only as fair as the data they're trained on. So making sure you're using your RAG pipelines correctly, you're giving it the right informations to look at, and the right insights are being put into place along with the security checks, the evaluations, and the criteria there. So some key takeaways, hallucinations and bias, they undermine trust. We can mitigate this through effective prompting, RAG, self-check models. AI agents are really the future, especially when they are grounded and monitored properly. And always prioritize fairness and transparency, and regularly monitor and evaluate, for scalable, reliable AI systems, because that's the way you can make sure your systems are constantly doing well. Yep. Thank you so much, and glad to be here. We'll take any questions, but also Manning has been really glad to provide you guys with a discount code. So yeah, just you can use this link as well. I think that links you to the book, and then this is the coupon code there. Yeah, I'll take any questions now as well.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So feel free to open microphones, and before you start Q&A, only 7 of you registered for the Manning Publications raffle. You may get this book for free, or any other product. So do that as well. So maybe I can start first if you can hear me okay, and then
Yeah.
yeah. So sounds like you like LangGraph as a favorite agent framework. So first question is, like, any other popular frameworks that you see in the YC community other startups are using? And second, what are the challenges in evaluating AI agents?
Yeah, I think as far as what other companies are doing, I think it's a blend between kind of creating their own graph cycles, because a lot of companies did experiment with LangChain, even we did at first, and then we eventually created our own, graph by ourselves, because it's not too complicated to build, and that time LangGraph wasn't there, right? So we created our own graph. So still see a lot of companies kind of, uh, doing it themselves, especially the ones that are very kind of AI first, because they want to be in control of the prompts. But I'd say LangChain, LangGraph are definitely the top ones there. Also, there are some more which are, just for RAG that you want to use. Llama Index is one. I see that being really used, and we're very simple to use. You just you can put in a PDF and just answer questions based on it. So it's kind of like a 2-line approach or 3-line approach, where if you want a simple RAG and you don't want to worry about creating the frameworks, the pipelines, that's one I recommend. So Llama Index, if you want to just spin up something fast for a basic like RAG use case. And LangChain, LangGraph for more of the customization, more of the flows there. And you had a second question as well, right, Daniel?
Yeah, it was about evaluation of AI agents.
Yeah, I think we're getting into a really exciting time where all companies are sort of, going headstrong towards building these, but it's going to become more important than ever to make sure you're evaluating them, because as you build new features into your app, your AI agents are also getting up to date. So you need to make sure it's not going off topic. It's still returning good responses. It's constantly working for even the old use cases. So having a monitoring pipeline in place with the evals, using those evals that I showed you guys with the large language model as a judge, or using the RAGAs pipelines there, being able to constantly track and monitor, because your users could come up with new cases that you've never seen before, because this is a whole new user experience of working with your application. So being able to constantly monitor and see how your users are asking questions. Another thing that you can do, which I think the DeepSeek model did really well, was showing you the chain of thought, right? The model shows you while you're looking at it, like how is it thinking? So that gives the users this additional insight, which can help you, solve issues down the line. So a user can kind of figure out, okay, maybe I didn't prompt it right because I didn't put in those chain of thought examples and I didn't, give it that sort of insight into how to solve what I'm trying to do. So giving that explainability is also key there.
Awesome, thank you. Who wants to go next? I don't see people. Oh, there are some questions here. Feel free to open the mic, Paul, David, whoever wants to.
I'll just say thank you. That was highly informative, and I just put on the Q&A. I am no longer practicing attorney, but still a licensed attorney and still very active in the legal community, and have a law tech fund that I'm launching with a few lawyer colleagues of mine. So we're really intrigued by just what I said, that this is an industry that has no margin for error when it comes to a whole range of things, confidentiality being perhaps paramount in that, because that's like sacred in our industry. So I would love to reach out to you after I get back from my trip to Asia, leaving tomorrow, just to talk about that a little bit more. I'm working with a number of emergent startups that are still in like pre-seed to seed, that are focusing on legal tech applications, often leaning on, of course, it's impossible to not lean on AI right now if you're in business. I'll just leave it at that, or perhaps just alive, but certainly in business. So I'm quite intrigued by that. These industries that are very sensitive, where mistakes have a kind of a echo effect. It's not just the mistake. There's potentially serious consequences. Medical field would be the most obvious application, where you literally be talking about life or death. But you had also mentioned justice and legal services, and just our D&O insurance, or our E&O insurance, I should say, is just massive. And that's just for intentional errors, never mind things that are beyond your control. You may know there's a canonical case very early in ChatGPT of a lawyer that was licensed in the New York bar that was suing an airline for spilling a hot beverage on their client. And they used ChatGPT like several versions ago, and it cited case law. So they filed their applicant's brief, and as we would do, they cited case law, the precedents that they were relying upon to make their argument. And they had case law of previous instances of airlines being held liable for such an incident. The only thing is, counsel for the defense went to search the cases. They did not exist. They literally did not exist. It wasn't that they existed and they were misinterpreted. They were completely made up. These were not causes of action. So, and the lawyer was reprimanded severely, suspended by the New York Bar Association. Worse than that, it was front page news in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, etc. So I feel like what's happening, at least in that industry, is the overwhelming kind of like FOMO leverage is causing firms to make decisions that are exposing themselves to liability without thinking it through. And that's the space I'm really intrigued in for any of these sensitive industries. So all your comments were really illuminating in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is I've spoken myself to a lot of these law companies who are, in the AI space of giving, lawyers information about their cases or finding new cases. And I think one thing that I've seen is having the citations in there and using the large language model as well as more AI tools to actually check, is it actually coming from, a real legal material? Is that actually reference being used? And that's when, RAG and these other things come really, really important, because you want to be able to check, like, is it cited correctly? Even if it has put a citation, is that actually accurate or not? So doing that double check, that triple check to actually verify, using different techniques there.
Yeah, I would say that there's like trust hierarchies in employee working with AI, but it's going to change everything. It reminds you early on in the e-commerce, people were very reluctant to give up their credit card. Now it's no more. You think twice about it. But there's new verification, new trust hierarchies. So, for example, giving autonomous agent the ability to really have agency over your financial affairs, actually book a flight that's non-refundable for you. Now the stakes are rising versus like they erred in a citation. I would double check that citation. I wouldn't rely upon it. It would be a shortcut, not a solution, if you will. But the more you surrender agency, the more it becomes a solution, not a shortcut, and that creates potentially moral hazard.
Yeah, and I've been seeing a lot of companies also invest in AI insurance now, just to safeguard themselves from, being liable for this kind of stuff. So very
That's
exciting
interesting.
trends there. because you can never fully really control, and you want to safeguard yourself and your company from accidentally creating an issue. But it's your job, as a founder, as someone working on these industries, to do your best that you can to prevent the user from harm and giving the users the right information they have.
Yeah, you'd be liable, like the way you're liable for the actions of an employee. You can't say, hey, it was the AI.
Yeah.
It's harm, you'll be sued if you were at all directing the AI through management directions.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
So David, you had a question. You want to read it, or you want us to read it?
I think he was asking us to read it because he's got his mic off. So maybe can you read it there, Rush?
Go ahead. In your experience, is using metadata and/or keywords more important with specific use cases or RAG models? For example, metadata more useful for an agentic RAGs? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how, I guess, complicated your RAG use case is. If you see that, if your users are asking questions about iPhone 15 and you see your RAG pipeline is picking up, topics about iPhone 14 just because like 15 and iPhone are kind of close together, and you're talking about international roaming, and the iPhone 14 in international roaming comes above and it picks that one. I'd say you'd have to experiment to see, are keywords more helpful? Is using metadata better? I'd say keywords is very common. So a lot of people, use a blend between keywords and RAG. I'd say that's more common than using metadata. So try that, but also try, different chunks. Like try considering, the top three chunks. Just play around with that number. It could be multiple chunks. You could, experiment to see which is performing better. But yeah, the hybrid search is really common. I'd say a lot of companies that had a search from before, especially, and they wanted to add RAG to it, they kind of go with like a hybrid approach where, they do a match with the semantics along with the keywords. So for example, for us, right, if we search for human resources director on our app, it will also pick up the people who have human like HR director, right? And now how does it know HR director is the same as human resources director? That's because of embeddings, and we've put that in place. So we've put like a hybrid search in place to pick up on both the keywords and the embeddings there as well. Yeah.
Hey,
Thank you. Who
Daniel,
wants to
I've
go
got a
next?
question for
Go
Rush.
ahead.
Hey, Rush, really love the presentation. And I'm sure you've delivered this type of presentation, either this exact one or versions of it, many, many times. Interested in knowing how it's been received and how that has changed over the time that you've been giving it. I'm sure that you're seeing interest absolutely just increase as time has gone on.
Yeah, and I think research has also improved a lot, actually. Researchers are constantly evolving these. We're seeing more use cases in place. If you see the whole like DeepSeek, the last time I did this talk, chain of thought was kind of just, a topic there for people to pick up. And now it's sort of like you can see a model that's actually been run with the foundations of chain of thought, stuff that was there, from before, but I guess we didn't have the time to experiment and see how to build new models with that. So we're seeing tons of new research come out each week, actually, with new topics to prevent hallucinations, improve the accuracy of these models. So as this space constantly evolves, we're seeing definitely a lot more interest, because a lot of companies are interested in building the best product and making sure it's not making up stuff, not hallucinating, and their evals are performing well. And one more thing, I'd also say that the competition in the space is getting crowded as well, because there's so many companies out there trying to build AI agents. And how do you compete when all your competitors are building AI agents? The way you compete is by building the best kind of AI agent, right? So how do you make sure yours is the best? By following these foundations, by evaluating constantly. So it's also a business value there where, you're able to build the best product, the best agents out there by following these principles. So I think people have gotten a lot more excited about this topic as time has gone by.
So one thought I had as you were talking, and tell me if I'm maybe understanding the potential of this. Let's consider Shopify as a platform.
Yeah.
It could be in Shopify's best interest to go and create some kind of an agent ecosystem, right? So
Mm,
it could show up with a library of agents that would take care of all of the conceivable general solutions that their customers could end up wanting or
yeah.
needing, and then they could also provide some kind of a exchange system where users who have created their agent for specific use cases in a Shopify world has posted that maybe 10% or 5% of the users of Shopify might be interested in. Is this where it could be going?
You mean like a marketplace, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
oh yeah, there are tons of companies doing that. Actually, even we are starting at Persona to build a marketplace. So a lot of people are contributing their version of our Persona agents. And a lot of users can like just click one button, access like an agent someone has created. So huge trends there, I'd say. Yeah, definitely. I think even I believe agents.ai created by Dharmesh Shah, the CTO of HubSpot. That's one of them as well, because you want people to contribute to these. And also, one thing I'd say that's made it really accessible for people who are not coding to build on as well. So we're seeing a lot more engagement in that because even people who, haven't coded before are able to build their version of it with these no-code tools.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Nikhil, you have a hand raised for a long time.
Yeah, again, so a couple of things I had in mind. I think I liked Shil, your the way you phrased it as like RAG itself is an agent. Like I think you're talking RAG isn't a separate entity. You can think of RAG as an agent, right? You are actually probably writing to it, maybe like if it's like a cache kind of thing, you're writing to it, or I mean, you add a cache to it, like I'm just trying to say, but or you're reading from it. So it's also an agent that you're interacting with it. That's a novel way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think the thing you talked about, like the middle documents are wasted. Like, and you think about like the long context print of some Gemini models or something, right? Like compared to GPT, and like I think
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense then if that's what's happening. But uh, maybe we can take this offline. But like I was working and we started a company like a couple of years ago, not currently involved with it, but like in the sales domain space again, very kind of similar to what Persona is doing. Uh, I wouldn't say direct competitor, but kind of doing. But we were also trying to uh, eh, better the sales calls that people have, account executives have, and all these people that have, and trying to get all the information from all these places, and then find out and suss up the correct information, and then pass it upstream, like to sales managers or sales directors. Because that a lot of information, a lot of analytics in that intelligence is lost, and to
Mhm.
try and get that. And so, which is why I asked the previous question was like not using AI for a real time sense, but for an asynchronous sense where you can then write it and then like push it upstairs into the in the pipeline. But some problems we faced particularly here was that when you're talking in terms of competitor mentions, like you're
Mhm.
selling a thing and like you talk about some other competitors, or you talk about some other things. We tried with embeddings. Sorry, we tried with like building
Mm.
a layer where you have all these competitors mentioned, and then you can keep on adding to this layer manually or whatever. Like there are different ways to do that. But it like how and we weren't like we started this in 2023, did a bit in 2024, so it was a kind of
Mm.
when the entire AI agents was pretty new.
Yeah.
If we were to do that with AI agents, like did you face this problem is my first question. And if you were to do that with AI agents, how would you do it separately? Because like having an like a layer, which kind of abstraction layer for that. Do you keep on enriching that layer with AI again and then reading from it, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so you're referring to having an entire call transcript and figuring out are they talking about competitors?
Sort of, yeah, yes.
So I see a lot of sales apps and different apps doing it. So even this app, if you see the takeaways that it posted on the chat, right? It has the
Mm,
full summary in there. So you can sort of take that, copy paste it into Claude, ask it if it's been mentioning about,
mhm.
competitors.
Yeah,
I think one thing for sure is that the models have gotten much better than in the past year.
right.
They've gotten
Okay.
much better at figuring out what's the competition or, stuff like that. I'd say, let's say it was very, very long and it wouldn't fit into, your context window. You could try to, do different things in there to figure out the competition. One is where you iterate over each of the portions, right? Let's just talk
Yeah,
very simple.
chunks it. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
chunk it and you go through each of the
yeah.
sections. Like, are they mentioning your competitors here? Are they mentioning your competitors there? And eventually you'll find it once you go that. This was kind of the way to do all sorts of long form text
Yeah.
before the context window came up big. I'd say for RAG, it is definitely more tricky because how would you define what it means to be a competitor? I'd say maybe if you use, kind of like topics. You create topics of competitors where, these are some kind of competitors that could be mentioned or company names or even company names, right? And then you have those company names and then you just check, okay, are the like, is this a competitor or not?
Yeah, but would you then keep on updating the RAG pipeline for this particular use case? Like I mean, like the RAG becomes more and more intelligent, if you will, or
Oh
increases
yeah.
its awareness, if you will, in a particular topic. Because
Oh
this
yeah.
is great in a generic sense, but again, if you're talking in
Yeah.
terms of what Paul talked in terms of the law space or the lawyer space versus the
Yeah.
medical space, again, those are pretty important, particularly in the medical space, because the words are very important, and you could
Oh yeah.
miss the spellings here and there,
Exactly.
and something different might happen.
Yeah, yeah. And that's when it becomes really important to test your RAG pipeline well, right? Try
Mm.
different chunk sizes, see which ones are working, add in, more context from the previous chunk,
Yeah,
next chunk. Do some keyword filtering as well, making sure like, are these keywords present?
exactly. Okay.
Is the other topics mentioned, checking for the metadata filtering. That would become more important, especially when you're doing cases where you're searching across all topics, like all sort of all documents. That's when
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
important. For your one-off use case,
One of
just
use case. Yeah,
creating
yeah.
might work, but then when you're looking at, searching for all legal use cases, right?
Mhm.
Uh, that might be definitely a lot more trickier, but for sure possible. I see a lot of companies doing this where they're, making search across all documents, whether that's research papers, healthcare. So yeah, I think you can use a lot of these techniques there to, experiment and see which ones are working.
Right. I had one follow-up question. Is like, could you just like few minutes talk about human in the loop in terms of the evaluating purpose, because that's we use that in my startup, but
Yeah.
again, and that kind of helped to train the models. But again, any comment you want to make on that?
Yeah, I think human in the loop is great. I see even I was reading like a paper saying that a lot of companies are still doing that even with the large language models, which is great to have. I think that's one of like red teaming and stuff is super important. I saw that some companies what they're doing is the large language model as a judge is flagging it, and then the human actually takes a look to see where you sort of increase that threshold. So you reduce the false positives to give the human person more chance to actually go and check what's actually going on. So basically like flagging
Yeah, yeah.
a more outputs as not being correct and you should, just so that you can go in and verify are things actually done the right way. um,
Like
and
a
have
ground truth, like an AWS ground truth kind of thing, or
yeah,
something of that sort. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and all these evaluation platforms, they kind of store your not all the platforms, but some of those that have the monitoring as well, they store your outputs as well. So you can go in and check, seeing which ones are taking too long, which ones have been annotated, and you can also go in there and flag things as well. And some of them allow you to just run a check to, check against the ground truth right there. So pretty powerful ways to like just see what's going on and have the human in the loop. Because the human in the loop, I think, is never gonna go away. It's just gonna be assisted by the AI and the large language model as a judge, but it's always critical to, have someone just see how things are going.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for that.
Perfect. So next in the queue is Gagan. You had a hand raised.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the beginning, so I'm still a newbie in this space, and I've been playing with Azure. Just wondering, like, have you heard of or have you had any experience with? There's a product called Azure AI Foundry, where they have content filters, right, built in, so they let you like filter out
Mm.
harmful content or ground
Yeah.
your thing. And even in Puri, at least, I saw that they make it easier to do the RAG. Like they let you get your data, and then you use Azure AI Search to, make it easier. Have you had any experience with or heard about Azure
Yeah.
AI Foundry, how
Yeah.
effective it is? That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that, and I've used it a while back as well. I'd
Okay.
say that they really made it easy to, take in those components and use them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so quick to get started. One more thing is that they have more security features if you run the models on Azure,
Mm-hmm.
especially before, so keeping that sort of security in place as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
Okay.
Especially last year, I remember talking to a lot of companies that preferred running the models on there, just because they had more of that security and insurance that, your data isn't gonna be used for training.
Exactly. Jailbreaking training and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you would say this is a good platform to start with because there's some hand holding, and then
Yeah.
eventually you can go into you doing your own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think these platforms are great to, just get started.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
We had it at introduction. If the platform has it, you use it. So if you every cloud vendor has it, so it's going to get you faster to POC. So I think Raj had hand raised before Subhash, but I'm not sure. So
Yeah, just one thing to add there. I just sent this link for Llama and Index. That's really simple if you just want to make a quick RAG pipeline. Give that a shot. So very simple, like just a few lines of code that you can, build your own document search.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rush, for the presentation. It was really informative. So I have a couple of questions, right? Like very generic in sense, but I just wanted to understand that if the bias is coming within the model, now the agents are, as you said, the agents are going to be more and more used. Like you said, the example of let's book a flight, right?
Yeah.
But Google will always use its own website. While I don't know if ChatGPT says like in training data, it's always Kayak, right?
Yeah.
So that bias, like, are there, I know, like you mentioned about testing, but are there any other architectures that we are using specifically to catch hold of these specifics, right? Like the bias, which are, because otherwise it will weaponize the whole, how the things are being used, right? Specifically. And the second question was more on the security, right? Like, I think Devin was just mentioning jailbreaking, but you have been knowing that prompt injections and
Mhm.
prompt leaking, like I can name, right? Like there are a plethora list of injections
Yeah.
that security we have. So
Yeah.
what are the things that you are like, or currently in the AI space, the companies are doing,
Yeah.
so that like, yeah, the data doesn't like, because data is holy grail anyhow.
Yeah.
And my third question is more, sorry, I know like I'm having all the questions at one time to you. My third question was around more of like, how are the non-deterministic, because as you know, I think Daniel also said in his present like initial introduction, every time LLM gives me a different response, right?
Mm.
So how do, like, suppose I'm building a tool, right, to maybe PR review, like small example, right? Every time a request is made, I get a different review altogether, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how are you like taking care of? I know RAG is one side, but still, how are you doing managing all these things on your side? Thank you again.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll get started. So one thing is that for your last question, right? If you want to make sure it's always giving a good output, do something like self-check GPT, which I covered in the slides. Basically, just run the model a few times and pick the best answer there. Another thing is some models have the seed functionality that you can use if you want to prevent randomness. Definitely try out that. But if you want to ensure like it's always giving the best response, um, right? If you wanna get the best response, right? Then you should like run it a couple times if you're comfortable with that, and then ask the model to choose the best one there. Similar to self-check GPT, and using that in a way to also figure out, have you answered the user's questions? Have you gone off track? Have you not spoken about something sensitive? But like you mentioned, bias is still going to be there because you're using a
So,
large language
just a
model.
minute, Rush. Before that, right? Like, as you said, right, we can do some of the functionalities like seed or use the ChatGPT check, right? But are there any frameworks like specifically caching the whole results, and then if the
Oh yeah.
intent is same, right, then they can just give out the same result. So the consistency. So are
Oh
there
yeah.
any frameworks being built right now? Are you
Yeah,
aware?
yeah. I mean, this is something also covered in the book as well. I'll talk about some of them. So one of them is you use embedding. So you embed the answer and the question. And I think Google search is doing a lot of this. That's why it's able to figure out, the AI assistant so quickly for
Right.
some of the results.
Mhm.
And it's not able to, spend too much for each query, where you embed the query, and then you see if it's similar to what someone has just asked you, and then you just pull that answer if it's similar with high confidence. That's one way to do it. Another one is Anthropic actually supports a cache also, but I believe it's only 1 minute or something less, where it just stores the raw text. So it'll store the raw text of your question, and if someone asks the same question again in like that particular time period, it'll just return that answer. Semantic search is much more effective just because, you could ask weather of either of San Francisco and San Francisco weather. They're both the same thing, right? You want to be able to capture that and give the user a question. So this is actually huge, and a lot of companies are doing the caching just because repeated queries are just going to be additional cost. Um, yeah. And as far as, the question you mentioned about the bias, you still need to be really careful because anytime you're using a large language model to evaluate another large language model, it could still have bias. So you could try using a different model just so that you get more of, a diverse sort of training data that was used to train the model, and have a human in the loop to actually, catch that, as well as use, filtering and content filtering just to make sure it's, not saying anything harmful.
Mhm. And the security aspect, like how, like about the question security, like are there any other frameworks like which are doing security for prompts?
So access control is huge, especially when you're talking about agents, right? You don't want them to access someone else's account or, access information they shouldn't have access to, even when you're building, company documents, and you don't want the entire company documents to be visible to all employees. You might have some salary data, someone's personal data that you don't want to be exposed to the rest of the company. So access controls are key there, and checking for prompt injection, checking for all those things, but making sure that your agent is using more of a rule-based approach to figure out what access it has to tools. So if someone logs in, right, they have their user ID, and then using that to only give them access to the tools they're supposed to. That's going to be super important because the moment you start introducing, things like transferring money, looking at confidential data, within these agents, it's going to be more important than ever to make sure that the access is not given to all employees or all people that have access to the tool. So I'd say like access control is huge there. And constantly doing just like how in security, you were doing testing for making sure people are not, abusing the system. We should be able to test for those particular edge cases as well, that you're not generating harmful content, you're not accessing data you're not supposed to, not trying to trick the system. So doing those prompt injection tests as well. So injection-based test is also key there. So, build a test data set that covers all these different things and constantly test for those. Because even as you update the models, right? Let's say GPT-5 comes out or you guys decide to go to Claude, you want to make sure those test cases are still working the way they are.
Makes sense. Thank you, Rush.
For sure.
Perfect. Subhash, thank you for waiting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have like three questions. I don't know if it's related to the forum or not. So I want to talk about like how do you guys pull the data set, because it's basically based on the data set, right? So basically
Mhm.
process the data set or you get it from specific sources, because I was thinking of developing a crypto AI agent. So any idea about this one?
Oh,
And
where do you fetch the data source? It really depends on what you're building. So if you're building like a crypto platform, right?
uh,
You would want your AI agent to get information about the prices. Like what's
mhm,
the price of ETH right now? What's the price of Bitcoin right now? So
okay.
giving it those APIs, checking which APIs are available to check the prices of coins. Like that's an example, right? Another one might be giving it access to news APIs, like finding out the latest news. Uh,
Okay.
that could be important. So depending on the use case, add those tools into your agent pipelines.
As in pipeline. So basically, we cannot develop the API from the base, right? Let's say we are using Ethereum. We need to use that platform for that one. We cannot.
Sorry?
I mean, like, let's say we are pulling the data from Ethereum.
Yeah.
So can we do it by the basics, like without Ethereum itself, without using any kind of platform? How much
Uh,
possible is it that from base, like without using any kind of platforms?
like platforms, as you mean like a web app or
Yeah, yeah. Let's say like a web app.
yeah, so if you have a web app, yeah, you can build an AI agent that has like a chat GPT kind of interface, and create an agent and give it access to the APIs. But you do need the APIs because you would care about getting that real-time information in.
How much easy is to get that data? Like,
Yeah, it's not too bad at all. I'm sure if you just did a Google search for,
hmm?
getting information about the prices of stocks, does someone here know
Okay, okay,
APIs?
okay. And one last question, like, do you think there will be like AI OS? Like, let's say now AI is just in like a conversational thing. So let's say, uh, I know the Microsoft Copilot is doing something like that. It's already integrating its application with an AI. So there's a ChatGPT with Microsoft Offices and other stuff. But let's say we have a Cortana. Let's say Cortana is taking our voice commands and automating everything without using any kind of inputs from the users. Do you think it's possible? Like, I know it's kind of like cross-platform, but what do you think the possibility of this one?
I think it's possible in the future for sure, especially as we're
Yeah.
seeing, um, apps come out that I've seen some that can book flights for you already. You just use your voice, you can
Hmm.
talk to it, it has access to it. I think we will sort of see, like a Siri that is able
Yeah.
to, do all these actions for you, like just your personal tasks, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then we'll see more of these advanced ones for, banking, stuff like that, that can do, more of the complex tasks, but you'll
Yeah.
see kind of like a personal assistant, which is what I think ChatGPT is trying to be. If you see
Yeah.
their newest launch, which was to reminders, Like
Mhm.
each day it would do like a particular action for you. If you want to find crypto news each day,
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, you'll see it. Okay, I've pulled out all the crypto news for you. And then you can, take actions on that. But in the future, maybe it can take the news, find out, has there been any eventful stuff going on? And does it think there's an option to buy it? And then, run based on that too. So it's going to be very customizable, I think, in the future.
Yeah.
And the good part is that it's going to be really accessible for people that don't even know how to code to sort
Yeah,
of
I
leave.
think that they are more of working in that kind of thing like Apple and Microsoft. Do you know any kind of startup that is trying to work on this kind of stuff?
I remember seeing an ad the other day, but I just can't remember the travel stuff. But a lot of startups are doing it for individual use cases, for insurance, for legal, for, e-commerce, doing it for, different use cases there. So like the e-commerce ones, are doing it. I know there's a startup called Luma for e-commerce where they integrate with Shopify and, just build a chatbot based on your Shopify store. So stuff like that is going to be there where companies are going to build their own version in there for, their particular tasks. And then there'll be like a general one for all people to kind of do their personal tasks like Siri. That's the kind of way I see,
Yeah, I think that's gonna be
we are
evolved in
kind
that
of
way. So
shaping out.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was just thinking of that
And
kind of
stuff
thing.
is moving really fast. So, by this year end, we'll see a lot of cool applications come across.
Yeah, it was a really insightful having you guys in the present. Thank you so much for everything. I
Thank
think
you.
we can collaborate soon.
Thank you. I'm not in a rush to go anywhere, so if there are more questions, you can ask them. If not, we can do the survey soon.
Just asking like one more question, right?
Okay.
Maybe, right? Like, what do you think about like, moving away from these large language models which are hosted by handful, right? So are there work going on SOTA models or like specific like because at some point of time people will start realizing that like where is the capital going in, right? Because ultimately you have seen like
Yeah.
OpenAI stopped its support to N8N, right? And maybe it's taking over one by one features which it thinks is more usable, right? So at the end of the day, if they stop the LLM like opening their APIs, then most of these wrappers are going to like it's very difficult for them to work through, right? So
Yeah, but the good part is that there's a lot of models coming out as well. So you have so many choices, right? Like the open source models as well that you can run by yourself, especially with, DeepSeek, Llama, coming out.
I believe models are not the problem, but hosting is the real challenge, right? Like
Mm.
running these models is a different story altogether.
Yeah,
Yeah. So how do you think like what is the direction that you feel as a
yeah.
uh, founder, right, to take if tomorrow the thing comes down to like, okay, we ban OpenAI, we are not going to give APIs from it, right? So what is your backup plan there?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna see, like I think this is the future where it's gonna be like there's gonna be many models. Some are smaller models that are specialized, like knowledge distilled models. If you
Yeah,
um
SOTA and small agents are there. Yeah, so a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is something also covered in my book about how we are, being able to. There's this company called Defog, which was part of my YC batch, and they were able to fine tune an open source model and get it to perform even better than GPT-4 for a specific use case, and being able to run that on-prem. So without giving their data. To open AI. So I think that's going to be like you're going to have many choices depending on what kind of model you want. And the good part is that when you do that, when you fine tune a model, you can often lower the costs a lot. And that also includes the cost to run the model as well. So even if you look at, the DeepSeek models, you can run it on your own machine, which is pretty cool, right? So I think the future is going to be you'll have many kinds of models where all these companies are constantly going to innovate and build larger models but also build you much better, smaller models. If you see, you know, the Claude models, they have several ones. Some of them are insanely fast. Like you can get a response like super fast, and you know, a lot cheaper. So you're gonna see models across the space, you know, the really big ones, the smaller ones, and then you'll also see more of these specialized models come in. So which is good for us in a way, you know, because we want to be able to access these at, you know, a lower cost with more flexibility, being able to choose what's the best fit for us. So I think I don't think we should be worried about, you know, banning open AI or something, because there's going to be tons of other companies that are also building in the space, as well as open search as well. Sorry, open source. Yeah.
Yeah, but like again, the transition might be difficult, right? Because OpenAI O1 is like reasonably good. I understand R1 is giving
Oh
you a
yeah.
tough competition, but like you have to change your whole architecture. Like your prompts might work. I believe it will
You'll
be
have to test
compatible.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the real challenge. But anyhow, like yeah, thanks, Rush. Thanks for your insight on that.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, and just to just to extend Raj's point, right? I think you also mentioned that there's smaller models that are coming into the picture, and when you look at it as a founder, and I mean, I wanted to ask you when in your YC batch and subsequent YC batches, right? I think in 2024, uh, I think there could also be a trend where you have, particularly, I mean, in the chat, we're talking in terms of the data security, right? Because like a lot of data leakage could happen
Yeah.
in the context window. There could be like this like models on edge, like edge models, where you have essentially those models embedded into the thing. Like I think we had pre LLMs, right? I think we had those Google embedding those language models within your smart
Yeah.
speaker, or like Alexa doing it in your smart speaker, right? So everything happens on your phone. It doesn't get transferred, and then it's more secure in that sense. Did you, and your thoughts on it, first of all, and
Yeah.
did you see more of these edge model companies, startups also
Yeah.
flying through the YC batches?
I did actually, and I did see a lot of trends where companies were, especially last year, I think now companies are slightly more open to calling, you know, these AI APIs. They were a little hesitant to give away any kind of data. You know, they didn't want to send any kind of data to APIs, which was good for these startups, because these startups were basically building it on-prem, like, you know, like telling them we will host our servers in your at your
Yeah,
company, so that
yeah.
you know it's fully secure. You guys know that your machines are only staying in your own data center and not going out. So did see a lot of companies being able to capture that market there, because people are still afraid of, you know, being able to send their data. Um,
Yeah, you just need something to spook people, and then I mean,
yeah,
I mean, Amazon is leaking your like chats anywhere, like, and that happened with smart speakers. Like,
yeah.
so
Oh
clearly, it
yeah,
could definitely happen with
yeah.
LLM. So
And especially when you're dealing with financial data,
true, true.
healthcare
Health
data,
data.
it's
Yeah,
more
yeah.
important than ever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I follow a few newsletters. I've started seeing smart strollers and smart, you know,
Yeah.
baby prams and stuff. So I mean, and that essentially they are. I don't know if they are essentially sending data back, or they have using those on edge models, but they have smart strollers. So you
Oh
can have
yeah.
all these things there.
Cool. Can I ask one more question? I know we're almost at 8. So it's not from your maybe personal experience, but you see many other startups in YC. Has MCP protocol by Anthropic taken off? It looks like a good idea to inject your own data into the workflows and have it standard, because things keep changing. But like I haven't used it yet.
Yeah, I think it's definitely common. Like people do use that as well. But they also build their own pipelines. Like a lot of people were doing that for a while, you know, injecting their own data, doing that, as well as like fine tuning is also huge, like the fine tuning model, right? For those that, you know, want more granularity on the outcomes and have a lot of training data to use, they also, you know, fine tune on them. But yeah, more common than that is just, putting your data set in, doing a RAG, building something out of it, being able to ask and answer questions. Just like the Open AI Assistance API is a little similar. But I'd say a lot of startups, they still use like LangChain just because they want more control on, doing that. For the simpler use cases, if you're just putting in like a side project, or something like that, right? You just want it to be quick. That's when you'd use like the Assistance API or things like that to quickly answer questions.
Mhm. Onur, you have a question if you're okay. 5 minutes straight.
Yeah,
Onur, please.
thank you, by the way, for the presentation, Rush. That was very i- informative.
Yeah.
My question is more just my personal advice. I mean, I request from you. I just graduated from data science last December. What fields do you recommend for me to? Do you think I should focus on LLM or c- computer vision also? I should be considerate. Thank you.
Uh, That's a good question. I think I'd say like first choose what interests you, and be flexible, it's a market where you want to be able to show the impact you have. So I'd say definitely the hype now is large language models. But knowing the AI foundations is really key because if you don't know the AI foundations, then you won't be able to apply to large language models as well. So knowing those foundations is, gonna be key, whether you want to use computer vision, large language models. So learning, the foundational stuff is definitely most important. But yeah, I'd say just, keep applying. I sent you a link as well, so feel free to like, go on there. There's a lot of startups that are hiring for AI roles out there. So definitely give those a shot.
Can I offer you advice as well, based on what I observe in the industry in Toronto?
Yeah.
Onur. So
Yeah,
that's
what
okay. So
was that?
I was thinking like there is a lots of kids finishing graduating from data science, but the focus of those data science teams is building new models. They're still living in the past. I don't think world needs more models. They need more car manufacturers. They need more drivers. So if you were
Mm,
to pivot from under the hood things to putting to use whatever data science teaches you through AI, I think you're gonna be way better data scientists. So it's like at one point there was, before there was front-end developer, back-end developer, then full stack developer. I think data scientists today are still living in a back end and they will be obsoleted. So I'm not data scientist, but like if you buy, I don't know, mining book like this,
mm-hmm.
data science, like business analytics, like these jobs are going to go. So I'll tell you, the book is starting
Yeah.
data analytics with generative AI and Python. So I would polish my Python skills. Then you can become AI developer. You can grow up into AI engineer. It's important to have critical thinkings and some systems engineering, systems thinking, and then talk to AI. It's going to help you. If you ask nicely, you're going to get the answer. So I would remove myself from under the hood. So John knows, like when we started this group, like Kubernetes was all over the place, and it was like people laughing at us. Why serverless? Like, who's going to do that? But we were able to survive by not knowing how to configure a set of Kubernetes clusters. So truth is in between. There is not black and white. So eventually, Cloud Run is an ideal serverless platform that is kind of based on non-managed, like auto-managed Kubernetes kind of. So Docker is kind of minimum intersection between the two. But I'm just giving you another perspective. That's from my
Mm-hmm.
personal observation after 3 decades in IT.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
So if anybody wants to add something, it's just one old
I, I have a quick
man's
question.
opinion.
I have a quick question. So, Rush and Daniel. So I'm a senior software engineer, and I've started playing with AI LLMs on the Azure platform and all. But so, I mean, I have to still earn my bread and butter, which is the .NET world and all. So it's hard for me to go very in depth in the math, doing the linear algebra, doing all that. So are there jobs, or do you think there's jobs for things like LLM ops? Like there's ML ops, like people
Yes.
who
Yeah.
are making it production ready on the cloud,
Yeah.
doing some prompts, and what is guidance for those people who don't have the data science background? Because I loved linear algebra in college, but it's hard for me to do all the math while doing my job. So what's the
You
advice for
don't
such
you don't
people?
need to. You don't need to for sure. There's so many roles out there. So I'd say if you're looking for an AI researcher job, that is kind of more in the weeds. But on the AI application side, there's
Right.
tons of jobs. So definitely, look at that. Especially right now, we're seeing a lot of software engineers, get interested in the AI space, and a lot of companies are hiring for the roles where, you just help them craft these. You don't have to look underneath the hood as much, but
Hmm.
really how to apply it, right? How do you apply AI to a business process? So, for example, like if you're working at a banking company and they want to build a chatbot, right? You can help them use these AI tools to actually build that. So you don't necessarily need to know the underlying, math or things there. You just need to know how to effectively use these AI models. So more on the apps layer. So definitely tons of jobs and roles out there for that.
On that, within that role, so suppose you're not doing the math, do you
Yeah.
think that even though you're not doing the lower level, do you think Python is a must? Like, so I'm a C sharp guy. Like, suppose somebody's C
Mhm.
sharp or Java, right? So right now, Microsoft came up with some libraries on how to
Mhm.
talk to LLMs from within C sharp. Learning Python is not a big deal. Like, you can spend, if you're a software engineer, you can pick it up, but I don't think I'll be as proficient as somebody who's had multiple years of Python. So is Python a deal breaker? And if so,
No,
how?
no, it's no deal breaker. Lots of Java
Okay.
developers, they injected it. So just start
Yeah.
talking to LLMs, to AI. And
Okay.
the title ML Ops, I think this is my personal perception, but I'm sample of one, that it's starting to be called AI engineer. So
That's right.
software engineer is becoming an AI engineer, and there is only one book at the topic, and it's not from Manning, it's from O'Reilly, but it's a really good one. So this book convinced the market that that's a new title. And then there is a group that I follow called Latent Space. It's just one link from them. These guys are on the edge, and they talk about hiring AI engineers, interview tips from the management point of view.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I don't know particular which post, but start from this review of 2024. It was one of the videos they had. Or
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your insights. Thank you.
anything else, or are we going to wrap up? This is unbelievable. Like I shortened the meetup and we're over 2 hours. Thank you, everyone. Any other questions, or are we going to do raffle?
It was a great talk, Rush. Yeah, it was a privilege to listen to you, and I think we all had a great discussion. I think not just Trish, but everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I love the discussions, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank
Thank
you.
you, Rush. Thanks for the presentation.
There is no list of books. It's only one book. Somebody asked me, so it's in the chat. So okay, let's do. Let me share the screen so you see who's going to win. I pasted the names of the folks. Where is it? This was Latent Space. Okay, here. So this is everybody. Anybody does not see the name? Alexei, you didn't enter it now, but I had your name from the last meetup, so you're in here as
I
well.
think I added, but I might be delayed. I don't know.
Who?
Raj, maybe. Yeah, I just 5 minutes ago.
Raj?
Yeah, I
Okay, let's do Raj.
Okay.
I'll trust you. Okay, so good luck. Steve. Congrats.
Yay!
I
Thank you
think
very
I have
much.
you.
Congrats, Steve.
Thank you very much.
This is awesome. So thank you. So the deal is you're gonna go to Manning.com website, choose any product you like, and then add it to your shopping basket. And is that the same email that you shared here? I don't know, but it's your dashboard in Manning. You probably bought something before, and then let me know, and they'll move the book from the basket into your account. So
Yeah,
and
I'll send the link in the chat for anyone that wants to
yes,
check it out. And Steve, yeah, you can go on this link and add that there. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
perfect. So let me stop sharing if I know how. And wish everybody good night and wish all the best with your business. We are cheering for you.
All the best.
And whoever else is a startup, good luck to you. And who's looking for work, also best of luck. Reach out to me. I'm consultant often between the jobs. Unfortunately, I know a thing or two about looking for work.
All right, cool. Thank you all. See you.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Okay, bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you.